I cannot wait to get into today's topic. My cat, Charlie, is Gotcha Day. And it got me thinking about the special relationship that can exist between pets and humans.
For those who might not have pets, stay with us because this will still resonate, I think.
I say that I'm a dog person, but I'm really a closet cat person also.
I am strongly a dog person. We've had Sammy, our golden retriever. And golden retrievers, they're walking hugs.
Yes.
That's
the lesson that I learned from my time with Hutch.
Did you rescue Hutch or did Hutch rescue you? Right?
You got to it, yes. Truly about allowing any being to be themselves.
And it is actually the easiest thing to be who I am.
There are aspects of my personality I often apologize for rather than a true appreciation of the beautiful uniqueness of who I am.
There's just so much that can be said of how we can learn lessons from pets, even if we don't own a pet.
Welcome to Simply Enough. This is Zachary and Elizabeth, and thanks for tuning in.
If you're liking our podcast, we'd love it if you'd share with your friends and family.
And then rate and review to raise our visibility and spread the message of enoughness.
We love you, and remember, you are simply enough.
Just as you are.
Period.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Simply Enough. I'm Mr. Zachary Leonard.
And I'm Dr. Elizabeth Ignacio.
I cannot wait to get into today's topic. It just makes me smile. And I think listeners, it's going to make you smile as well. This is a topic that Dr. Ignacio and I just love to talk about. So I'm just going to get us into it. I was looking at my calendar, as I often do, to check about what's going on in the week and everything. And I noticed that coming up this week is my cat, Charlie, is Gotcha Day. And we made a note in our calendar because we don't know when Charlie was born. And Charlie is a black and white tuxedo kitty. And we don't know when Charlie was born because we adopted him from an animal rescue. But we want to celebrate when we got him, and then this is often a day that many families that adopt pets or humans or whatever have, a gotcha day. So we have a gotcha day for Charlie. And it got me thinking just about pets in general and just the special relationship that it can exist between pets and humans, and just how blessed I've been to have pets my whole life. Now, admittedly, I say that I'm a dog person, but I'm really a closet cat person also.
Another closet, Zachary.
I know.
And let me just interject really quickly. I'm only a new and recent pet owner of a little over 2 years. And can I just say that what I think we're going to talk about in terms of our pets and the lessons that, we've learned from our pets and by being a pet owner actually can resonate with those who don't have pets. So for those listeners and viewers who might not have pets, stay with us because this will still resonate, I think.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And thank you for that. I forget because I've just always grown up with animals, right? That there's a whole group of people out there that for whom that may not have been their experience. But yeah, so I grew up with dogs, and boxers in particular was the dogs that we had growing up. I love
boxers. Mm-hmm. They're white little mitts.
We had the boxers who didn't have the cropped ears. So they had like the soft floppy ears, but they did have the cropped tail. But anyway, so grew up with dogs. And eventually when I lived in New York City, I lived in an apartment where I couldn't have dogs. And my husband actually was very encouraging of wanting to continue to have a pet and, an animal to come home to and whatnot, which is why he said, your building allows cats, you should consider getting a cat. Where this is going is ultimately my first introduction to having a cat was my husband Kevin's cat. When we started dating, her name was Queenie. She was the first cat I met. And when I was invited to Kevin's apartment for the first time, I literally thought this cat was going to kill me, like was going to claw me to death. I believed all the stereotypes about cats. And when I sat down on the couch and she jumped on my lap, I thought, this is it. Like she's just going to shred my legs, and I'm now cat fodder here. But we had a very, very special bond. And there was a time when I was in the hospital for my appendix had ruptured. And I just thought I had a stomach ache, and I was actually Super Bowl Sunday quite a few years ago. And I went in with just like to the ER with just 4 days of stomach discomfort. Come to find out that my appendix had ruptured, and now there was infection all in my abdomen, and it was actually quite serious. When I came home after the doctors had cleared out the infection, that cat never left my side. And it was as if she knew that I needed love. It was if she knew that I needed her and she needed me, and we had to support each other. Now, having dogs and whatnot growing up and having a special bond with all the dogs, I would say that I understood that relationship, but I don't think I ever really had it like the forefront of my mind until I'm sitting there after being in the hospital. And really, from what I understand, and Dr. Ignacio, you would know this way better, all the metrics that the doctors saw after all of my tests was clear that it was a major emergency, that my appendix had ruptured, and that the infection was so badly spread that had I waited a few more hours, it could have been catastrophic. And then so to come home and to just know that I was through the darkest part of it, and then to have Queenie with me, and she literally like never left my side. And the way in which, the way she would look at me, and when I need to get up or whatever, she would also just kind of follow me. And then if I was in the restroom or somewhere, she kind of sat at the door. I finally realized, I think at the forefront of my mind, truly the special relationship that can happen. And there's nothing like, at least in my experience, what it's like to have a pet, an animal in your life with you. So I know that kind of launches us into this idea of pets. And I hope that, like you said, that for listeners that don't have, that they're still going to find a lot of takeaways. But I just want to kick us off with that story today.
Pets are so amazing. And you talk about, my being a doctor and the benchmarks and that we use in terms of metrics and laboratory tests and whatnot. And pets are amazing. Would you believe that there are dogs that are trained by the smell to sense when a diabetic's blood sugar is too low, or can literally, I don't know whether this is smell or what, but somehow dogs sense when a seizure is impending and can get their beloved owner, their beloved partner out of harm's way, almost forewarning them that a seizure is about to come. I mean, pets are incredible. I am strongly a dog person. And like I said, I am new to being a pet owner, relatively new in the grand scheme of things. So we've had Sammy, our golden retriever, for a couple of years, and she has just changed our life, and certainly our lives in our family, and definitely has changed perspective in how I see love and how I see being present and mindful in the moment. She has changed how I look at eating. I'll talk about that. There's just so much that can be said of how we can learn lessons from pets, even if we don't own a pet. Certainly for me, myself, though, words don't teach. I learn from experience. And so that's why having Sammy has been well worth the tuition of the lessons learned from Sammy.
As you were talking, Dr. Ignacio, I couldn't help but think about a dog that I had in New York City. His name was Hutch, and he was a Chow Chow. And for those of you that don't know the breed of a Chow, they look like little lions. Like they're smaller, compact dogs, and they're big and they're fluffy and they look super cuddly and cute. But what's interesting about the Chow breed is actually more cat-like in that it's fiercely independent, and often if it's not socialized, if he or she is not socialized young as a puppy, can have difficult time relating to other dogs, particularly at the dog park and whatnot. That the kind of cute, fluffy like nature of the dog can belie its actual level of independence and aloofness. And so people,
as opposed to Sammy and golden retrievers, which are walking, they're walking hugs. Yes. That's what Goldens are. Okay. I gotcha.
And
Sammy is the worst guard dog ever, everybody. She barks for attention so that you can pet her. Like she is a robber's best friend. Yeah, sorry, I digress. Go ahead.
no, but definitely not Hutch, because you would think he was cute and you could just cuddle with him, but man, he had a bark and a bite to him. But so I also rescued Hutch, and where after you were talking, why I was immediately drawn to.
Did you rescue Hutch, or did you rescue Hutch, or did Hutch rescue you?
Okay, so
right?
You got to it, yes. The lesson that I learned from my time with Hutch was truly about allowing any being to be themselves. Okay, and the reason why I say that is, for a chow, Hutch loved walks. Now, this is not a breed that's known to be athletic, but come 3:30 or 4 o'clock when I got home from teaching, he was ready to go on his walk. And if that walk wasn't an hour and a half, he needed to go back outside. And it wasn't because he wanted to, use the restroom. It was because he loved being outside. In addition, he loved going to the dog park, but the difficulty was that because he wasn't really socialized with other dogs at the dog park, he didn't really know how to interact with the other dogs, but he loved being there. So you would often see like this cluster of dogs all kind of like scuffling and playing and whatnot. And little Hutch was just off in the corner, like sniffing the grass or something. And then he would go to try and engage, and yet he would have a hard time not really knowing the dynamics of play, and he would play kind of rough or not understand that maybe the game had moved on, and yet he was still trying to engage. And I found myself initially, particularly at the dog park, apologizing a lot to the other dog owners about the ways in which Hutch was engaging or not engaging, and then also feeling bad that he was off in the corner and being like, no, Hutch, like, go play with the other dogs. Like, go. You know what I mean? Like, I
totally do, because I can also imagine parents doing this with children. So that's why I'm laughing, especially.
And that's a little bit of why I think that this particular story and my relationship with this beautiful animal can find common ground in other areas for people that don't have pets, because there was another dog owner who had a dog that was similarly behaving like Hutch that I would see relatively regularly. And finally, this person was like, why do you keep apologizing for your dog? This is your dog. This is Hutch. This is who he is. So he's at the dog park. He's doing what he loves. He's trying to learn how to engage in the way that makes sense to him. So unless he's like biting or attacking other dogs and now he's dangerous and he needs to be removed, which admittedly did happen a couple times, he's fine the way he is. Do you know what I mean?
Yay! I totally know what you mean. I love that. And I love how when we place our kind of external expectations and we kind of write a manual for another living being, pet or human, everybody, that's actually where a lot of angst comes about. And what I mean by that is so Sammy, a golden retriever, like in our house, we have to be sure, where do we put our socks so that there's no socks like on the floor, because it's a choking hazard, right? So out of safety, we don't want her getting socks. But initially, like, especially like as a puppy, when she would come and she would like grab a sock and we'd have to like try to wrestle the sock away from her. And now she doesn't wrestle the sock. We don't have to wrestle the sock away from her. She actually, it's kind of like, look what I brought you, Mom. Here's your sock, as opposed to being like, oh, Sammy, why did you bring why did you steal my sock? Okay, first of all, am I not the human? Am I not to be more aware of where I put the sock as opposed to blaming Sammy for getting my sock, right? So first of all, let's look upon myself and my behavior, and then look upon Sammy's behavior. And what I mean by that is I often say, whether I'm about to like be frustrated or scold, or if another family member is about to jokingly scold Sammy, my answer is kind of like, well, she's a dog. Like what are we expecting other than who or what she is? That is dog behavior. Specifically for Sammy, that is retriever behavior. So yeah, she's going to go find a sock and then, retrieve it and bring it back to like, if when we play at the park and we throw a ball and we teach her to retrieve it, why would we then expect any differently if that is her inherent, innate nature?
Mm-hmm.
Why are we then going to expect anything differently? And that can happen with humans as well.
Mm-hmm.
Good or bad. So if there is a person in your life that is irritating or hurtful or insulting or whatnot, why would we keep expecting, hoping that person to change their behavior to make us happy when that's who they are and they're showing up as who they are right on time? That is their innate, retrieverness. That's innately who they are. So it kind of liberates one from being disappointed if we don't have those expectations, which again, that's a totally different episode about what's the big deal about being disappointed, but that's a different episode. Right. But then also our own recognition of our ownership of our own behavior, which is, well, I, left my socks out, or, that person keeps yanking my chain. Well, why do I keep putting my chain out there for it to be yanked? That kind of thing. Mm-hmm. That's certainly one thing that I've learned in Sammy's dogness is that we all have our own humanness. And so, if there is repetitive behavior, let's look at what's ourselves that's bringing about that behavior, but then also let's recognize and liberate ourselves when we recognize that's that person's innate behavior. A person can make a mistake, once, learn from it, possibly repeat it, but then learn from that. But if that mistake is repeated, then that becomes a pattern. Mm-hmm. And if that pattern is inherent, then that is innate behavior. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And if I can add on, not just to what you were saying right now, but a little earlier, to build upon what you're saying, and just the beautiful gift that I got out of this lesson from Hutch was also, I think I do that to myself too. Mm-hmm. And there are aspects of my own personality, so not my behavior, but own personality, that I think I often apologize for or feel needs to be quote unquote fixed or changed, rather than a true appreciation of that's just the beautiful uniqueness of who I am. Mm-hmm. So, as an individual who has, as I've talked about, a superpower of vulnerability, I do often apologize for my sensitivity, as if that's somehow something not to just embrace and own and accept as it is. So as you were talking about how we can apply this beautiful lesson that we can gain from our relationship with pets in particular, but humans in general, is I feel like I can also just apply it to myself, which is an acknowledgement of just an acceptance of who I am. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so yes, I hope that doesn't take away too much from what you were saying.
Not at all.
That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah. I mean, so here, that principle, if you will, applies to every single human being, which is this. For those of us who are recovering perfectionists, for those of us who are afraid of making a mistake, the very point of being human is the imperfections and making mistakes. That is innate in human behavior, in the human lived experience. So to expect any differently, well, again, to expect any different dogness out of my dog, Sammy, that's the same thing too. To expect anything different from the humanity of each person, that's too much to ask, because perfection is not innate in being a human being. Mm-hmm. Being void of mistakes is not innate of being a human being. So allow ourselves that permission to make mistakes, allow ourselves that permissions to be messy and imperfect, as we've said in prior episodes, because that's who we are. Now, if that doesn't mean that we we sit in it and not examine it.
Mm-hmm.
And we can examine it and see, okay, well, in this moment, does that sensitivity I growing up, that was actually, I was labeled that I was, quote, too sensitive often, from friends, family, teachers. And there are moments that I could examine and say, well, in that moment, did the sensitivity serve me?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that sensitivity, it did serve me. I just wanted to share with you that, yes, I've been labeled that way, as if that's a terrible thing. And sometimes it serves me and other times it didn't serve me. And it's in recognizing that is something innate about myself. It doesn't necessarily mean that I sit in that all the time either. There's a saying, your personality can be your tendency, but it doesn't have to be your destiny. But you decide what of that innateness shows up in different moments of one's life. You don't have to apologize for it, but you also don't have to feel subjugated to it or imprisoned by it either. But again, allow yourself that grace and self-compassion to recognize we all are who we are. We all are simply enough, just as we are. Not so much a pet, but a favorite animal, if you will. Kermit the Frog.
Oh yeah.
The Muppet. Yeah, I love the Muppets for so many reasons. There's so much genius behind what appears to be childlike humor with the Muppets, but there's actually a lot of adult genius behind it. But Kermit the Frog, one of his, he's known for especially, I'm talking like he's a real thing, like a human. But anyway, Kermit the Frog is known for two songs. What the first one? Why are there so many?
The Rainbow Connection.
Yeah. So he's known for the Rainbow Connection. Love that song. But then another song is "It's Not Easy Being Green." And the truth of the matter is, and the irony of the song is, though he's talking about it's not easy being green, at the end, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong if you know the song, but I think he comes to terms with, but I am green and that's who I am, and I'm not going to change it. And it is actually the easiest thing to be who I am. It is the easiest thing to be green. Why fight that? It is who he is. First
of all, so I grew up with the Muppets and Fraggle Rock and all of that. So just the nostalgia of thinking not only about what the lessons that came out of Sesame Street, the Muppets and whatnot, but like, to me, Kermit is real. Kermit is a real character. When later on they got somebody else, a new person, to be the voice of Kermit, and that voice wasn't the same. It felt like, oh, that's not my Kermit, So yes, and just the life lesson in that, as you were talking, it made me think, and then forgive this tangent back, and I'll bring it back to the Muppets in a second. Is one of my favorite holiday movies is National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation, and of course that movie starts to escalate in terms of all the shenanigans that happen and how it just gets worse and worse and worse. And one of the biggest ones is when there's a squirrel that's in the tree, and then the dog then chases the squirrel and just destroys the house, right? Like knocks the china and the hutch down and goes through the trash. And in that moment, you're like, bad dog is kind of what you're thinking, but that's what the dog is supposed to be doing. I mean, like
exactly.
The dog its innate personality, characteristics, everything are to chase that squirrel, to be a hunter, right? And yes, we find.
What do you expect?
Yeah, what do you expect? So as you were talking about, it's not easy being green. I don't know why I immediately thought of Christmas Vacation and this dog who I imagine would have gotten scolded for doing that, and he's like, but that's just what I'm supposed to do, right? And right.
But I often have in my head, when I look at Sammy as she looks at me with her like big eyes, and I'm about to jokingly scold her, is I can hear her made up voice in my head, which is, but I'm a dog.
Yep.
Like that's it. Just very simple. One sentence.
I think for children or anybody really watching the Muppets, why a song like that is truly important, because it brings out a very real human quality, which is true self-love and true acknowledgement that for those of us, people pleasers, perfectionists, people who are too sensitive, insert adjective, there's a matter of factness about it. There's just it
Yes.
is what it is. And then what we do with it, I think, is where enoughness comes in. And I wouldn't have gotten that necessarily in that direct way without my relationship with Hutch or thinking about Kermit the Frog. And which is why I just believe the relationship between pets and humans, to your point a long time ago, is Hutch rescued me, right? No, truly, he rescued me from seeing myself in a way that was not serving me the best way, which is not embracing or owning who I was and the qualities of who I am that are actually quite unique and beautiful. So that was just how I wanted to bring it back around to what you had brought up earlier.
And it's amazing too about how we as humans impart our expectations, right? To the same point, hammering it home, how we impart our expectations on our pets, and then extrapolate a little bit how we impart our expectations on other humans, including ourselves. So one thing I'm going to say is Sammy helped me with my eating. How could that possibly have happened? I have learned the difference. It's so funny. In my 21 years of practice as a surgeon and my being in 43rd grade of learning, with all of this like academic educational learning and my clinical practice, it's funny how something has finally hit home by observing my dog, or our dog. Sammy's actually Gracie's dog, but we've all, she's all very special to each and every one of us in our family. But anyway, I learned, so much. I learned something very important relative to food and nutrition from Sammy. And what she helped me with is the distinction and the difference between habit and motivation. And what I mean by that is habit and motivation. And let's take specifically hunger, for example. So a lot of times people comment on, my cat is always hungry, or my dog is always hungry. And every time my, dog or cat looks at me with this hungry look on his or her face, I just can't believe, how can they be hungry again? I just fed the pet. And there's a big difference between hunger and being food motivated. What I recognize with Sammy is, and pets in general, is they're very much in the present moment. So in learning the difference between habit and motivation versus being mindfully present of one's true needs, that's the difference between being hungry and being food motivated. So Sammy can eat anytime and every time we are, in front of her. We happen to be eating. She looks at us with those cute golden retriever puppy dog face eyes, but that doesn't mean that she's hungry. That just means that she is food motivated. That made me realize myself the habit of eating and feeling like I impose upon myself, I have to eat 3 meals a day. Yes, I am a doctor and I am saying this. You don't have to eat 3 meals a day. That has become learned and conditioned. And that's actually not being in tune with mindful eating and being present with one's food and eating habitually versus one's actual needs. Do you see what I'm saying? Wow.
No, I'm just to keep you going, but just to affirm what you're saying. I can't tell you the number of times that I think, well, I should eat,
right?
Even though in the moment I am not hungry. I am, but I have internalized well, it's dinner time. Therefore, I need to have my 3rd meal today. Therefore, I should eat, even though that is contrary to what I feel in the moment at that point. So to just affirm what you're saying, I totally understand what you're saying right now.
In Sammy making me more mindfully aware of my eating habits, Sammy and her innate dogness has actually made me more aware of just being mindfully present, being in the moment. That's what animals do instinctively and innately, is being in the moment. They don't have the regret of the past and the worry of the future. They are in the moment. And that's why truly their love is so unconditional. And I think that's why and what humans look for and are drawn to in pets is that unconditional love, which stems from a very mindful presence in the moment.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. There's a wonderful illustrator that produces a number of videos called Simon's Cat. And Simon's Cat is basically pencil drawing animation. And for any cat owners out there or non-cat owners, I think you'd find a lot of humor in the behavior that this artist is able to represent through the illustrations and the animations of the cat. Why I bring it up right now is because what you're saying is certainly very obvious for Charlie, the cat that we had, and Queenie and Tucker, another cat that we had, because in the morning, cats decide like it's time to eat now, or I want you awake. And the beautiful thing about why I set up the I want you awake is because, and dogs are similar, but I'm just to build off of what you were saying, as it's connected with Charlie. Charlie is definitely food motivated, but Charlie wants you to wake up because he wants to be with you now. And so like he'll like meow in your face or paw your face, or he'll dance across your chest or whatnot. So then I will get up or Kevin will get up and go to feed him, but he won't actually eat the food. He will just kind of sit there and be like, okay, now it's time for you to be awake. It's time for us to engage, because in that moment, he wants to connect with us. He wants to be around us. And that may not be the clock that we're on. And we're like, no, we want to be sleeping because it's 5:30 in the morning or whatnot. But the beautiful thing is that his communication couldn't be more clear, which is in this moment, I want to play, or this moment, I want you awake. And what's even more interesting in that regard is because Charlie in particular is a social eater. If you put the food out for him and then you go back to bed, he won't eat it. He will wait until you are there and around, and then he'll eat, but he will actually look for you at that time. Right. So to just step back and give you another example of what you're absolutely saying is this beautiful animal, right? This little spirit couldn't be more in the moment and also more clear about what he wants in that moment. And oftentimes in this case, it's just to connect and be with us. And I read somewhere that cats in particular think that you're another cat, like you're part of their pack. They don't know you as humans. I don't know whether or not that's true or not. Even still, it further emphasizes that you're absolutely right. Pets, animals are in the moment. I know that there are times when I get mad because his moment doesn't like jive with my moment, but there's still a beauty in that. And I just thank you for giving that to us today, because I don't think I've ever thought about it that way.
So there is a neuroanatomist, Dr. Jill Bolte Taylor, and she was out of Harvard, and she pursued neuroanatomy she pursued neuroanatomy specifically because she had or has a brother, very close in age, who has the diagnosis of schizophrenia or possibly schizoaffective disorder, either one. But so she was fascinated as she was growing up, like what is the difference between her brain and his brain? Like, why are the perceptions so different? So that's why she went into heavy academia of neuroanatomy. And so she, it was a PhD at Harvard. And then she had a stroke, and the location of her stroke was in her left hemisphere. The brain, for those of you who are listening, is made up of, like, if you imagine like a walnut, literally that's what a brain looks like. And there are two halves. So two hemispheres, left brain and right brain. And if you're at all interested or intrigued by this, she wrote a phenomenal book called My Stroke of Insight. And it talks about her stroke. And for those who don't like to read, a fantastic TEDx talk or TED talk as well. So it's about My Stroke of Insight. And she speaks of what she had learned at the moment of the stroke and the years of recovery that it took. And from that, she likens her brain to kind of four personalities, two in the left hemisphere and two in the right hemisphere. And in the left hemisphere, primarily, that's very precortical, very cognitive, executive function. I'm getting very scientific, but so on the left side of the left hemisphere, which is very kind of rational, there's one component that is of executive function and very linear. Then there's another portion of the left hemisphere that has a lot to do with memory and worry. And that's the area where she had her stroke. So her right side of her brain was still healthy. And so because of her stroke, she was living very right-minded. So in the right side of her brain, the personality of the character that she attributes to this component on the right side of the brain is very present in the moment, very lack of extension of boundaries, meaning you and I are melding together. I don't know where I end and where you begin, and I don't even know where I end and where I begin. So it's very, very much in the moment, very sense oriented. And from that place, this neuroanatomist academician found so much joy that she purposely looks to be more in her right mind and in the right side of her brain. And the personality that she attributes to that part of her brain, she describes to be like Pigpen in the Peanuts, like a little bit almost chaotic because in the present. But when I read about that personality that she attributed to Pigpen, because Pigpen's messy, I didn't really like that. Like I didn't like that. I actually attribute that side of the brain to being Sammy-like, being very much in the moment, being very much in the present, not knowing the extension of where I begin and where I end. Sammy doesn't know when she puts her paw on me, that's a true connection, physically, or whether it's, a virtual connection. Poorly stated how I'm describing it, but I'm just trying to say that there is a scientific phenomenon and scientific basis to this exercise of being present in the moment and being pet-like in the moment. There's so much that we can learn from our pets and our pets' behavior that is actually very innate in ourselves. But it's as we grow and as we quote learn that we realize there's actually so much that we have to unlearn and remind ourselves and remember and pets can be that model for us of getting back in touch with our innate humanity and our innate human experience, which is actually very akin to pet behavior and pet experience.
I laugh every time you throw out some disclaimer or apology about how something was clunkily worded or whatever. And it's like, no, actually that was pretty spot on in the way that it was worded and its articulation. I want to thank you for inviting people that don't have pets to stay with us, because as you just beautifully ended our episode with a lovely reminder that what we can learn from our relationship with pets is similar to what we can learn not only with other people, but also with ourselves. And the reminder to stay in the moment, and also the reminder to give oneself permission to accept oneself and others for who they are. These are huge things that we keep coming back to in Simply Enough, and to see the extension of these lessons in our relationships with pets and how they can apply to our relationships with others and ourselves, I think is universal. And even if you don't have a pet, you can still find a lot of access here. So thank you for setting us up in that regard.
Also with this episode, I hope for those who don't have a pet, and again, I'm a relatively new pet owner, that maybe you'll look at us pet owners a little differently too, and not judge how so into our pets we owners are, and then extrapolate from that too. also, one reason why we love our pets so much is they are a source of unconditional love, and a reminder of being worthy of unconditional love. And so for those of you listeners and viewers who don't have pets, know that that is true of you as well. And just remember that you are worthy just as you are of unconditional love. If you don't or can't have a pet, honestly, go to another pet owner and ask to, at the park or on the sidewalk or wherever, if you can play with them for a while.
Yep.
Getting a little dose of pet love.
To build off what you just said, not only are you simply enough just as you are, but you are more than enough. You are more than worthy. You are more than valued. You are more than, which is what we have mentioned in a previous episode, that you can see that you are not just simply enough. You are more than enough. Just as
you are. Period.
Bye.